I'll show you the gold mine that's right in your backyard.
Now, when I started out, well, they didn't have any internet. There was no internet. No, and there was no books in the bookstore. As a matter of fact, no one even ran classes on that. So I started calling around to various counties. I just started calling and finding out what they paid. Now, one of the counties I called was Baltimore, Maryland. Now, I called there because I heard they paid 24% on a tax certificate. So I called the county and I said, listen, I'd like to buy some tax certificate. And they said, well, fine. I said, how much do they pay? And they said, 24%. And I asked them, I said, could you send me a list? And they said, well, sure. As a matter of fact, they sent me like a catalog is what they did. And there was 9,000 certificates just in Baltimore County. Now, I said earlier that the counties, over 3,000 counties, this is one county, and there's 9,127 certificates. My point is there's going to be plenty for everybody. Okay, so then the next thing I did, I said, well, I found the gold mine, so I think what I'll do now is I'm going to call some of these other counties. So that's what I did. So I called Tampa, Florida. That's Hillsborough County. And I got a woman on the phone, and I said to her, I said, listen, I'd like to buy some tax certificates. She said, great. And I said, can I get a list? She said, no, you can't have the list. I said, well, how am I going to buy if I don't get the list? And there was a pause, and I finally said, I said, well, why can't you send me the list? And she said, the list is too big to send. I said, are you serious? She said, yes, so many people haven't paid their taxes. I said, well, how will I do this? She said, you have to call the newspaper. So I called the newspaper, and folks, there it is. That's the newspaper. There's 40,000 tax certificates available just in Tampa. That's one county in Florida. That's only one county. So that got me on the hunt. I said, wow, I have found the absolute gold mine, and you just found it too. Okay, so I started calling different places in different counties and different states. So I called New York State. In New York State, they sell the property for the back taxes. The starting bid at the auction is to sell the property for back taxes. So I called, and I started out with one county, and here's what happened. These are brochures I got from different counties. So here's one you can see. It says Amsterdam, New York, 100 properties, and the starting bid is the back taxes. Look, they even sent me pictures of the property. Now, each one of those counties has a different number of properties, and you can call the county, and they'll send you that list, and you can buy it. Those are the houses that are going to come up for auction right there in those counties. Starting bid is the back taxes. They have open land, they have ranches, they have farms, they have houses, they have barns, they have everything you ever conceived for sale at these auctions, and every single county in America has those. So finally, I called Los Angeles County. When I called there, I got a grumpy guy on the phone, and I said, listen, my name is Ted Thomas, and I want to buy some tax certificates. Well, you don't sell tax. I said, what do you mean you don't sell tax? He said, we don't sell those. I said, well, what happens to those high-priced California properties? He said, we auction them off for the back taxes. And I said, hold on, you're talking about those high-priced California properties they're going to sell for back taxes? He said, the starting bid is the back taxes. And I said, well, can I ask you one more question? He said, make it quick. And I said, okay. When you sell that property at auction, what happens to the mortgage? And he said to me, he said, the mortgage is wiped out. And I said, well, how can that be? He said, it's the law in California and every state in America. When the county auctions that property, the mortgage is wiped out. Now, folks, I said to him next, I said, I'd like a list of properties. He said, send me $12 and I'll send you the list. Now, he's only going to send me Los Angeles County because that's where I call. This is only Los Angeles County, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. There's some other properties that you could go 468 in that one county. There's Los Angeles County. How about that? Every property in that book, and there's about 6 per page, that's bigger than most people's phone book. So I'll give you some idea there. Hundreds of properties. Last year I had 3 people. This auction is just coming up, but last year I had 3 people at the auction. And when the auction was all over, there was still 1,000 properties left over. I'll tell you how to get those a little later on. Okay, so you're kind of getting the idea.
Thousands of certificates and many tax defaulted properties have no bidders. The counties are inventorying these properties. I'll show you how to get them for minimum bid or less. Now go to my website,